How do you follow up one of the greatest games of all time? The obvious thing to do would be to create a sequel, of course. However, Miyazaki and his team at From Software chose a different path. This is the story of the conception, the enduring legacy, and everything in between of what I consider From Software's magnum opus, Bloodborne. After finishing up the Authorities of the Abyss DLC for the original Dark Souls, Sony approached From Software to create a game for their upcoming console, the then still unannounced PlayStation 4. Excited about the opportunity to work on brand new hardware, the team eagerly agreed. Meanwhile, with FromSoft's second team occupied with building Dark Souls 2, Miyazaki seized the opportunity to lead the development of this new IP, which they internally called Project Beast. The game would be set in Gehrman, a fictional city characterized by its Gothic and Victorian architecture. The team had always wanted to make a game set in the Victorian era. However, the 7th generation of consoles just weren't powerful enough to do the setting justice, with all of the flowing fabric and super detailed architecture. With the power of the PS4, they could finally realize their ambitions. Miyazaki and the team traveled to Romania and the Czech Republic for inspiration for the game's architectural design. He cited Bram Stoker's Dracula as one of his inspirations, so it can be assumed that many old castles were visited. The Grand Cathedral at the center of Gehrman seems to have been influenced by the numerous cathedrals found throughout Romania, but the strongest influences can be seen in the Czech Republic's capital, Prague. The winding streets, the verticality and Gothic shapes all made it into the game. The Astral Clock Tower bears a striking resemblance to the astronomical clock in the center of Prague. There's a blog post by Brick that made some awesome observations about possible inspirations, which I will link in the description. So they had the look for the world down. But what would Project Beast be about? Like Miyazaki's other works, this game would be an action RPG. However, unlike the Souls games, it would be characterized by a fast pace and aggressive combat style. The Victorian setting lends itself perfectly to this vision, as people typically wore more nimble outfits rather than armor. He also aimed to incorporate firearms into the game without turning it into a shooter, so the firearms from the Victorian era made a perfect fit. Miyazaki had two central themes he sought to explore, the first being the exploration of the unknown, and the second the intense struggle for survival. The game leans heavily into horror, and the influence of the works of Bram Stoker and H.P. Lovecraft can be felt throughout. The opening level of the game is basically a melting pot of typical Gothic horror genre conventions. Beasts, pitchfork-wielding villagers, madness, body horror, dimly lit streets, broken carriages, the list goes on. Aesthetically, it reminded me a lot of the 2004 Van Helsing movie, which is quite a fun watch if you go in with the expectation of a popcorn adventure flick. Another movie that was a direct influence on the game's aesthetic was the 2001 French film Brotherhood of the Wolf. It even had a trick weapon similar to the beast cutter we got in the game. Trick weapons can be transformed into alternate forms, each with different attacks in their transformed mode. More on that later. So where does H.P. Lovecraft and his cosmic horror come into play? In the game, players encounter eldritch beings and uncover horrifying truths about the universe. Bloodborne explores insanity, induced by encounters with the unknown, cleverly weaving this theme into its gameplay mechanics, narrative structure, and environmental design. What I love the most about this is that Sony and From Software never revealed any of this in the promotional material. It shows an immense amount of restraint, not to showcase all of the amazing designs you've made, to give the players the opportunity to discover all of it for themselves, very much in the spirit of Lovecraft's work. For a game as atmospheric as Bloodborne, the team needed a musical score. Composer Ryan Emmon had previously released a self-published trailer record titled Divinus under the alias City of the Fallen. Some Dark Souls fans had used music from Emmon's album to create a fan-made trailer. This caught Miyazaki's attention. Impressed by the music, Miyazaki reached out to Emmon and enlisted him to work on the soundtrack for Bloodborne. In total, a whopping 6 composers worked on the score, including 3 in-house from Software and 3 American composers. This cross-cultural exchange of ideas gave the soundtrack a very unique atmosphere. There was a notable event leading up to the game's release in 2015. In Denmark, there was a shortage of young male blood donors, with only 38% of the total donors being male. PlayStation Denmark partnered with the regional bank GiveBlood to organize a blood donation event. As an incentive, everyone who donated blood or registered as future blood donors received a copy of the game. That has to be one of the cleverest PR stunts ever if you ask me. On March 24th, 2015, Bloodborne was released to the public. Let's see how From Software did, shall we? We arrive in Gehrman, seeking a cure for an unspecified illness. The blood found in Gehrman is believed to possess healing properties. We sign a contract with the doctor, who offers us blood in exchange for becoming a hunter. Gehrman's citizens have slowly turned mad, and some of them have transformed into beasts. A hunter's task is to rid the city of these monsters. But you are no ordinary hunter. Your consciousness is now bound to the hunter's dream, and you are able to awaken over and over again. I obviously had many questions, but Gehrman, our only living companion in the dream, just tells us,
"Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good."
So kill a few beasts we will. The combat in Bloodborne plays quite differently from its predecessors. Enemies are more numerous and aggressive, meaning you can't just sword and board, as in Dark Souls. FromSoft gave the players tools to deal with this new aggression though, in quite clever ways. The first is the dodge mechanic. If you lock onto an enemy and press circle, you will do a quick-step maneuver instead of a roll, which lets you quickly reposition and gives you invincibility frames. The cool thing is that you can still use the classic roll when playing with an unlocked camera. The second tool at the player's disposal are the trick weapons, some of the most badass weapons FromSoft have ever designed. These weapons can be transformed, enabling them to switch into alternate modes with unique attacks. You can seamlessly chain together attacks using different forms, effectively doubling the available moveset compared to previous From Software titles. Just take a look at some of these designs, absolutely amazing. The third tool is your firearm, Bloodborne's answer to parrying. They use silver bullets, which are a finite resource to prevent spamming. It's not primarily used for dealing damage, unless you have a very specific build, but rather to stagger enemies. Timing your shot right grants a small window of opportunity to perform a visceral attack, dealing massive damage. And finally, there's the rally mechanic. After taking damage, for a short time you have the opportunity to regain some of your health by dealing damage to an enemy. This incentivizes staying on the offense. Miyazaki's own interpretation of the rally mechanic is that the health bar we see is actually a representation of your will to fight, which is why it can be refilled. When I first read this, my mind was blown. I just love how he thinks so deeply about all of the little details. When you combine all of these systems, you get the intense struggle for survival Miyazaki was talking about. I feel like Bloodborne was From Software's first game to significantly reduce the jank present in their previous titles. Unlike before, you can't just spam backstab enemies as easily. Now you have to execute the charged R2 from behind to position an enemy for a backstab. It requires a lot more strategy than before. Another great addition is that enemies don't simply wait for you to enter their aggro range. Instead, they actively patrol the levels, which really adds to the feeling of a living world. And my favorite addition that Bloodborne made is the inclusion of boss weak points. In older FromSoft titles, you could occasionally cut off a boss's tail, but aside from that, there were no unique ways to interact with a boss. Many Bloodborne bosses have weak points with a hidden stagger value. If you manage to hit a weak spot with enough damage, you can break a limb or bring the boss down, opening it up for a visceral attack. This makes fights much more engaging and strategic. Bloodborne is also a more streamlined experience. It takes the classic Souls formula and strips it down to only its essentials. Allow me to elaborate. With only 6 stats to manage instead of 8 or more, the game simplifies character progression. Despite having fewer weapons and spells, Bloodborne maintains diversity through the inclusion of trick weapons and blood gems. These gems serve as customizable upgrades for your weapons. The game also simplifies upgrading by using one type of upgrade material, eliminating the need to collect various Titanite materials as required in Dark Souls. Furthermore, equip load and armor weight no longer affect dodge speed. While I'm not suggesting these changes are automatically better, they do make for a more intuitive gameplay experience. This idea aligns with Fumito Ueda's design ethos, design by subtraction, which Miyazaki has acknowledged as a significant source of inspiration. This philosophy, evident in titles like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, permeates throughout Bloodborne, highlighting the significance of simplicity and essentialism in game development. In terms of gameplay, Bloodborne isn't flawless. For instance, it uses blood vials as a healing system, allowing you to carry up to 20 at a time, which is quite generous. However, the issue arises from their finite nature. Once depleted, you either have to purchase more or farm them by defeating specific enemies. I understand the intention behind it. They wanted to emphasize the rally mechanic and the struggle for survival. However, in practice, it became extra punishing for players who were already struggling. Another issue introduced by Bloodborne is that many weapons are either acquired very late in the game or are located in the DLC, severely limiting early game options. Then there are the Chalice dungeons, optional dungeons located below Gehrman, featuring randomly generated levels with unique enemies and bosses. It's a really awesome idea that significantly boosts the game's replay value. However, there's one problem. They can become quite repetitive and grindy. While the concept is fantastic, the execution falls short. Personally, I completed all of the main ones for the Platinum trophy, but never really got into them again after that. And perhaps most frustrating of all are some of the boss runbacks. While this isn't exclusive to Bloodborne, as it's been a staple of the Souls games, some of these instances are particularly punishing. I'm glad this issue has been addressed in Elden Ring with the introduction of the Stakes of Marika. And that's just about all I have to say about the gameplay. Now, let's shift our focus to what, in my opinion, Bloodborne does better than any game I've ever played. World building, atmosphere, and story.
Dear oh dear, what was it? The hunt? The blood? Or the horrible dream? You were at my side all along.
Only an honest death will cure you now. Liberate you from your wild curiosity.
Seriously, why does the Ace Combat soundtrack go so unfathomably hard? Anyway, let's get back on topic. Let me start with the city of Gehrman itself. In my opinion, it's the most well thought out and cohesive world From Software has created so far. While it may not offer the same diversity and open-ended exploration found in Dark Souls 1's Lordran, which is still the clear winner in that regard, Bloodborne's Gehrman stands out with its strong visual identity and logical structure, with every location seamlessly fitting into the grander cityscape. Take for instance this fan-made map by Only with Numbers, which illustrates how the hidden cave in the Forbidden Woods connects to Yosifka's clinic and how Old Gehrman lies below Central Gehrman, aligning perfectly with the lore. And for a game set mostly in one location, they did a pretty great job of diversifying the areas by giving each one a distinct look. The small, grave-ridden village of Hemwick, the burned down remains of Old Gehrman, and the grand Gothic center of the Cathedral Ward all have a different feel to them. Also, it's really impressive to me how closely FromSoft's concept art resembles the actual game, highlighting the strong vision the team had. One thing I really enjoy about Bloodborne is the fact that FromSoft is not afraid to hide some of its best areas, making it all the sweeter if you do find them. Take the orphanage in the Upper Cathedral Ward for instance. Typically, FromSoft's games reserve music for boss fights or hub areas. However, Bloodborne makes two exceptions, and the orphanage is one of them. As you step into this area, there's an immediate shift in atmosphere. It becomes oppressively claustrophobic, accompanied by the haunting sounds of a choir. The corridors are dimly lit, filled with locked doors, adding to the sense of isolation and foreboding. Then, just as you begin to navigate this eerie environment, a werewolf suddenly lunges at you from a nearby window. It's a moment straight out of a Resident Evil game. Despite the small size of the location, the orphanage is incredibly effective. Plus, it serves as a path to two optional bosses afterwards. The second area featuring music outside of a boss fight is the Hypogean Jail, which is also very easily missed. To access it, you must be killed by a kidnapper enemy, who will then transport you to a late game section of the map and imprison you in the jail cell. The music in this area is deeply unsettling, evoking a sense of dread not experienced anywhere else in the game. One of the coolest aspects of the music is how it starts out muffled inside the church, but when you step outside, you're greeted with the full force of the choir. A fan theory suggests that the School of Mensis is performing a ritual to summon the One Reborn, a boss fight encountered later in the area. This is what I mean with the level of cohesion this game has. Almost everything in the game serves a purpose. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, initially you know very little about this world and its story. You're simply instructed to go kill a few beasts. However, the game provides both subtle and not so subtle hints throughout the journey. I'll offer a brief summary to provide the big picture, but for a deeper dive into the lore, I highly recommend checking out The Pale Blood Hunt by Redgrave, available in both audio and written formats. In the world of Bloodborne, powerful multi-dimensional beings known as the Great Ones exist. The people of Gehrman discovered blood connected to these beings in the city's tombs, known as the Old Blood, which possessed remarkable healing properties. Scholars sought to understand the Great Ones, but many succumbed to madness from their acquired knowledge. Additionally, there's the Healing Church, which utilized the healing properties of this blood to strengthen their control over the city, inadvertently causing the townsfolk to transform into beasts. To combat these beasts, the Hunters were formed, tasked with hunting them down every night. Throughout the game you acquire insight, symbolizing your understanding of the eldritch truths and cosmic horrors within the world. This insight is gained by encountering specific enemies, consuming items like Madman's knowledge or defeating bosses. As your insight increases, more of the truth is revealed to you. At 1 insight, the doll in the hunter's dream comes to life, allowing you to interact with her and level up. At 15 insight, it is unveiled that the church doctors in the cathedral ward have lamps ridden with eyes. Upon defeating Rom or acquiring 40 insight, the amygdalas are revealed to you. These lesser grade ones have been observing you since the beginning of the game, a revelation that stands as my favorite twist in gaming. And finally, at 50 insight, the music in the hunter's dream shifts to a beautiful melancholic tune. On top of this, the higher your insight stat, the faster you are affected by frenzy, which represents madness in the game. Certain enemies, such as the genuinely creepy winter lanterns, induce this condition. When all is said and done, I find insight to be one of the best yet simultaneously disappointing mechanics in the game. What's included is undeniably awesome, but it feels like there's so much untapped potential. It was particularly sad to learn that there were originally plans for more depth involving insight and the different moon phases, only to have them cut from the game. For more information on the cut content of Bloodborne, I recommend checking out Lance McDonald's videos. I'd like to wrap up this section by discussing the characters. Bloodborne is a bit light on NPCs, but I really like the early game section, especially with the option to send various NPCs to either the Earthen Chapel or the clinic. The doll is a highlight too, serving as your one constant refuge from the nightmare. It's a shame we don't encounter many NPCs later in the game. The game makes up for it with the bosses though. Many of them are very tragic characters who have succumbed to beasthood. In an interview, Miyazaki mentioned that the longer a character clings to their humanity and fights off beasthood, the more twisted they eventually become. FromSoft did some amazing visual storytelling with this concept. Take Father Gascoigne for example. He's overcome by beasthood, but can be reminded of his humanity if the player plays a song that reminds him of his family. Vicar Amelia, on the other hand, maintained her humanity for much longer due to her strong faith. Even after transforming, she clings to what little she has left by holding on to her pendant. And then there's Ludwig, the leader of the church hunters, who became what he once hunted. He too is reminded of his humanity when he notices the sword he used to hunt beasts with on his back. But perhaps the two most tragic characters of all, who didn't turn into beasts but were victims to blood drunkenness, are Lady Maria and Gehrman. Maria, once a student of Gehrman, was consumed by guilt over her involvement in forbidden experiments. She became trapped in the Nightmare Realm, deeply ashamed and desperately trying to prevent anyone from uncovering their secrets, even resorting to blood magic, which she had rejected all her life just to stop you. Gehrman, who harbored feelings for Maria, made a pact with a Great One, called the Moon Presence, after her mysterious disappearance, binding him to the hunter's dream for eternity. Both yearn for release from that torment.
Oh, Lawrence, Master Willem, somebody help me, unshackle me, please, anybody. I've had enough of this dream. The night blocks all sight. Oh, somebody, please.
When the night finally ends and your hunt is complete, Gehrman wishes to end the nightmare for you by killing you and releasing you from the dream. Despite all of his suffering, the old man would rather bear the burden of hosting the nightmare himself than to see you take his place. If you choose to fight Gehrman instead of accepting his offer, you are choosing to liberate him and become the new host yourself. Neither of you fights for themselves here. Instead, you fight to prevent the other from suffering eternally.
The night and the dream were long.
And so, the hunt begins again.
Bloodborne might not have the strongest boss lineup, the biggest build variety, or the largest world in the FromSoft catalog, but it's the tightest, most cohesive package From Software has ever made, and it's the one game I keep thinking about long after I put my controller down.
Oh, good hunter.
Bloodborne released in March 2015, and by September of that year the game had sold over 2 million units, exceeding Sony's expectations. The game received universal acclaim, achieving a Metacritic score of 92, and by February 2022 it had sold over 7.4 million units. Bloodborne came out at a time when the PS4 did not yet have a strong lineup of exclusives, so it filled that gap perfectly. To this day, the game maintains a die-hard fanbase. One of the coolest examples of this is the unofficial Tomb Prospectors Covenant, a group of players on Reddit who scour the Chalice dungeons for rare wandering bosses, enemies and unusual rooms. As of November 2019, the Tomb Prospectors community has mapped and explored all 2300 root dungeons. Nevertheless, enthusiasts persist in their exploration of these dungeons even now. Another great example of the dedicated fanbase is the upcoming Bloodborne-inspired kart racer called Nightmare Kart. It is made by the same developer who created the Bloodborne remake. As an April Fool's joke, the developer made a fake trailer for Bloodborne Kart, which got a lot of attention. This led the developer to turn it into a real game. However, Sony got wind of this and asked her to stop its development. Yet they said if she removed the Bloodborne branding, the game would be free to release. As of the making of this video, the game is scheduled to launch for free within 2 weeks on Steam and itch.io. I'll include a link in the description if you want to learn more. So, with such great sales and a passionate fanbase, it seems like a no-brainer to make a sequel, remaster or remake, right? Especially since Demon's Souls and Dark Souls already got theirs. But for some reason, there hasn't been a word from Sony since the release of the Old Hunters DLC back in late 2015. The team at FromSoft has said that Bloodborne is a title they hold very dear, and Miyazaki has even called it the one that stayed in his heart the most. The problem is that Sony owns the IP, so they decide the future of the series. It's absolutely criminal that one of the best games of all time is stuck on hardware that's over a decade old and runs at an unstable 30 FPS. Lance McDonald, the same guy who showcased all of the cut content, even developed a fan patch to get the game to run at 60 FPS. It's beyond crazy to me that Sony hasn't acknowledged Bloodborne since 2015, aside from their demand for Bloodborne cards to be changed. Now, for the love of God, Sony, throw us a bone. Hey, thanks for watching my video all the way to the end. I know this game has been covered a lot on YouTube, but I just had to share my thoughts on one of my favorite games. I hope you learned something new or appreciated my perspective. That's all for now. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.